There are betrayals in life that feel like a wound, sharp, bleeding, unforgettable. But then there are betrayals that cut through bone, shatter the soul, and leave you wondering if anything you ever believed was real. Mine came just weeks before I was supposed to marry the woman I had loved since I was 16. My name is Daniel. I'm 32 now, and 6 years ago, my entire world imploded. Rebecca and I had been high school sweethearts, a classic small-town love story. We met in sophomore biology class, became lab partners, and something just clicked. She had this quick wit, this fierce intelligence that drew me in. From that moment on, we were inseparable. While other kids were breaking up and moving on, we stayed together. Through high school, college, long-distance stretches, summer jobs, life plans. She was my first love, my best friend, the only person I ever imagined building a future with. I remember saving up 3 months of part-time pay to buy her a simple silver bracelet for our 1-year anniversary. She wore it every day, even when it broke, and I clumsily fixed it with wire. She called it her lucky charm. We had traditions, late-night drives through the mountains, Saturday breakfasts at the same diner booth, handwritten notes hidden in each other's backpacks. When we graduated college and returned to our hometown, I was ready. I worked 2 jobs to save for a ring and an engagement she would never forget. I recreated our very first date. Same restaurant, same corner table, even the same awkward tie I wore at 16. After dinner, I took her to the hilltop where we'd shared our first kiss, got down on one knee, and asked her to marry me under the stars. She cried. I cried. It was perfect. We spent months planning the wedding. Rebecca picked out a vintage lace gown. I chose a charcoal gray suit and wrote my vows in a leather notebook I carried with me everywhere. We were less than a month away. The invitations had been sent, the venue booked, the flowers ordered. Our families were thrilled. Or so I thought. Then it happened. It was a Thursday evening. I had just gotten off a late shift, and Rebecca was waiting for me in the living room of our small apartment. She was pale, shaking. Her hands were wrapped tightly around a cup of tea she hadn't touched. "I need to tell you something," she said, barely above a whisper. I thought maybe she wanted to postpone the wedding. Cold feet, nerves, something we could talk through. But the words that came next shattered me. "I'm pregnant, and it's not yours." I sat frozen. My ears were ringing. I couldn't breathe. "I've been seeing someone," she continued. "It's William, your brother." Time stopped. My younger brother? The boy I helped with homework, coached through his first breakup, defended in schoolyard fights? That William? She kept talking, saying she didn't plan for this to happen, that it started as a mistake, that she caught feelings, that she didn't know how to stop. But none of it made sense. My brain refused to process the betrayal. They had been having an affair for almost a year. Behind my back. While I was planning our future, saving for our honeymoon, writing vows about forever, they were sneaking around, tearing everything apart. And now she was pregnant. With his child. I don't remember much after that. Just the sound of my own heartbeat pounding like a war drum. The taste of iron in my mouth. The crushing weight on my chest. Rebecca cried. Said she was sorry. Said she loved William now. Said she hoped we could all find a way to move forward. I left. I didn't yell. I didn't throw anything. I didn't scream. I just walked out into the night and didn't stop walking for hours. I couldn't go home. So I drove straight to my parents' house, expecting, hoping, for comfort, for outrage on my behalf, for the family I trusted to be as shocked and heartbroken as I was. But what I got instead broke me even more. When I arrived at my parents' house that night, I was still numb, running on pure instinct, like a man crawling through a nightmare, hoping to wake up. My childhood home looked the same. The porch light was on, my father's truck in the driveway, my mother's roses blooming along the front path. But something had already changed inside me, and I didn't yet know just how much more I was about to lose. I walked in without knocking. My parents were in the kitchen, drinking tea and playing cards, completely unaware of the bomb about to drop. I told them everything. My voice was shaking, my hands trembling, my chest burning. I laid it all out. Rebecca's confession, the affair, the pregnancy, the betrayal by my own brother. And do you know what my mother did? She gasped softly, and then said, "Well, at least now we know why Rebecca's been so quiet lately." No rage, no shock, no horror, just a quiet, almost relieved acceptance. My father looked uncomfortable, sure, but he wasn't angry either. He simply muttered, "That's complicated. and got up to pour himself more tea. I stared at them in disbelief. I thought they hadn't heard me right. I repeated myself. I reminded them that my fiancée, the woman I'd been with for 10 years, had cheated on me with their youngest son, that they were having a baby together, that our wedding was off, that I had just lost the love of my life, my future, everything. But instead of comforting me, instead of standing by me, they began to rationalize. Maybe she was confused. William's still young. Maybe he didn't mean to hurt you. Try to be the bigger person. And then the dagger. Daniel, honey, don't be selfish. A baby is coming. You should be happy your brother is stepping up. Selfish? Me? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I felt like I was in some twisted alternate reality. The people who raised me, who were supposed to have my back no matter what, were siding with my brother and the woman who had ripped out my heart. They were already treating this unborn child like the golden heir to the family. My mother even said she hoped I'd be involved in the baby's life, that I could be like a cool uncle. That night, something inside me broke. I looked around the kitchen, the photos on the fridge, the clock on the wall, the teacups we'd used since I was a kid, and I knew I didn't belong here anymore. I didn't shout. I didn't throw blame. I simply stood up, said goodbye, and walked out the front door for what I believed would be the last time. I packed my bags the next morning, quit my job, sold my half of the apartment, and moved to a city 3 hours away. No goodbyes. No explanations. Just silence. The calls came for a while from my father, mostly. But they weren't apologies. They were vague, polite check-ins. Never once did he say, "I'm sorry." Never once did he ask how I was coping. And so I stopped answering. My mother never reached out. Neither did William. Or Rebecca. And that was it. A decade of love. A lifetime of family. Erased. For 6 years, I built a new life. I worked hard, kept to myself, and slowly began to find peace. I saw a therapist. Made a few good friends. Dated casually, but never seriously. The idea of trusting someone again, truly opening myself up, felt impossible. I buried the past as best I could. Until 3 weeks ago, when the past came crashing back with one unexpected phone call. It was my mother. The woman who hadn't spoken to me in 6 years. The woman who stood by as my brother destroyed my life. The woman who never once said she missed me. And her voice was trembling. "Daniel," she said. "It's William. He's been in a terrible accident." When I heard her say his name, William, my stomach turned. For a few seconds, I said nothing. The line was quiet except for my mother's shaky breath on the other end. 1,000 thoughts were rushing through my head. Was this a trap? A guilt trip? Some elaborate attempt to rope me back into their twisted family dynamics? Then she said it again. "Daniel, please. He's been in a car accident. He's in the hospital." I asked what happened, my voice low, distant, like I was asking about a stranger. She told me he had been driving home from work when another car ran a red light and slammed into his driver's side. The collision broke his spine. He'd survived, but he would never walk again. Paralyzed. Forever. For a long moment, I felt nothing. Just emptiness. Like I was outside my own body, floating above it all. Then came a faint flicker of something grief, perhaps. Not for him, exactly, but for what this meant. For the final confirmation that the little brother I once played catch with in the backyard, the boy I protected in schoolyards, was gone in more ways than one. My mother's voice broke into my thoughts again. She wasn't just calling to inform me. She was calling with a request. "Rebecca can't handle everything on her own," she said. "She has the child to care for. The household. William needs round-the-clock support, and we're not getting any younger." Then came the real kicker. We were hoping. Maybe you could step in. At least for now. Be there. Help out with the boy. He needs a male figure. A role model. I blinked, stunned. Did she seriously just ask me to come back into the family that gutted me, to help raise the child born of the deepest betrayal I'd ever known? I wanted to scream, to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I took a breath and answered as calmly as I could. "Are you out of your mind?" I reminded her what they had done, what he had done, what she and my father had chosen to overlook, to excuse. I told her I didn't owe them anything, not a visit, not a favor, not even a phone call. "You chose them over me," I said. "You buried your son the day you sided with the people who betrayed him. Don't dig me up now just because you're drowning." She grew defensive. Predictably. Accused me of being bitter, selfish, cold. "Family is family," she said. "You don't just turn your back when things get hard." I almost laughed. Not out of amusement. Out of disbelief. You turned your back on me when things got hard, I replied. So don't preach now. Before hanging up, I told her not to call again unless it was to apologize, truly, sincerely, and without conditions. And even then, it might be too late. When the call ended, I felt like I was suffocating. I stared at the screen, at the number I hadn't seen in 6 years, and felt the old wounds ripping wide open again. The betrayal, the loss, the silence, all of it came flooding back. And yet, a small part of me, one I hate to admit exists, felt something else. Not forgiveness, not sympathy, curiosity. What if William really was suffering? What if that child, my blood, whether I liked it or not, was growing up in chaos, confused and afraid? Did I want to carry the weight of ignoring that? The next few days were hell. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. I kept seeing Rebecca's face, William's grin, the way they looked at each other that last week, when I thought everything was still fine. I felt sick. Eventually, I made a decision, not because they deserved it, but because I needed answers. I would go to the hospital, just once, not to make peace, not to forgive, just to see with my own eyes if the wreckage they spoke of was real or just another manipulation. Walking into that hospital was like walking into a graveyard of everything I thought I'd buried. I hadn't seen any of them, not William, not Rebecca, not my parents, in 6 long years. 6 years of silence, bitterness, therapy, and rebuilding. And yet, as I stepped through the sterile white hallways, the past came crashing down around me like a wave I couldn't outrun. I could have turned around. I should have, but I didn't. I found the room easily. His name was on the door in blocky black letters. William Jacobs, ICU recovery. My hand trembled slightly as I reached for the handle. I stood there for a moment, just breathing. Then I opened the door. The scene inside took the breath from my lungs. My younger brother, once so full of life, of arrogance, of betrayal, lay in a hospital bed, pale and frail, tubes running from his arms, machines softly beeping beside him. His face was thinner than I remembered, gaunt and hollow. His hair was messy, peppered with gray, and there was a tension in his expression even while he slept. Sitting beside him was my mother, looking old, far older than I had expected. Her hair had lost its shine, her posture had curved. The years had not been kind. When she looked up and saw me, her mouth fell open. For a moment, she looked like she might cry. Then Rebecca turned around. Our eyes locked, and time stopped. She looked different, tired, worn, drained in a way I had never seen her. But her presence still felt like a punch to the chest. There she was, the woman I had once planned to build a life with. The woman who left me for my own brother without a shred of shame. The mother of the child she'd conceived while I was planning our wedding. She stood slowly. For a second, she looked like she might speak. But I turned away before she could say anything. I walked past her and stood at the foot of William's bed, trying not to let my emotions show. He opened his eyes just then, maybe stirred by the change in the room's air, and when he saw me, his eyes widened. Daniel? His voice was cracked, barely above a whisper. I said nothing. He tried to smile. I saw pain cross his face. Not just physical, though there was plenty of that. No, this was different. It was recognition, guilt, maybe even shame. But it was too late. I turned to my father, who was standing awkwardly in the corner, silent until now. Tell me, I said. What happened? He cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. He told me about the accident, how William had been hit on his way home from work, how the car had rolled, how his spine had been crushed. The doctors weren't hopeful. He'd never walk again. As he spoke, the door creaked open and a small boy stepped into the room. He looked to be about 5 or 6. Brown hair, wide eyes, holding a plush toy tightly in one hand. He hesitated when he saw me, clearly unsure of who I was. Rebecca knelt beside him. This is Uncle Daniel, she said gently. The boy blinked up at me. You're my uncle? I didn't know how to answer. I nodded once. Yeah, kid. I guess I am. It was surreal. This child, this living, breathing reminder of the moment my life shattered, stood looking at me with pure innocence. He didn't know the damage his parents had caused. He didn't know I had once loved his mother more than anything. He didn't know the man in that bed had stolen everything from me. And yet, he was just a boy caught in a storm he didn't create. I stayed a few minutes longer, mostly silent. Rebecca didn't try to speak to me again. William barely kept his eyes open. My parents looked at me like they were trying to memorize the moment, as if afraid I might vanish again. Eventually, I turned to leave. But before I reached the door, my mother whispered, "Come to the house. Please. We need to talk." I hesitated, then nodded. Not for them. For me. I needed closure. And maybe, just maybe, they needed a dose of truth. When I pulled into the driveway of my parents' home, 1,000 memories ambushed me. The porch where I'd once sat and carved pumpkins with William as kids. The upstairs window that had been my bedroom, my sanctuary, for most of my youth. The faded swing still hanging from the old oak tree, creaking slightly in the wind, as if haunted by echoes of our laughter. But this place didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a shrine to a life that had ended the day Rebecca confessed and my family turned their backs on me. My mother was waiting on the porch. She gave a hesitant smile, the kind you offer a wounded animal you don't want to spook. I gave her a curt nod, then followed her inside. The house smelled the same, coffee and lemon cleaner. The walls were still lined with photos, except the newer ones. I saw wedding pictures of William and Rebecca, family trips, birthday parties, their son grinning in front of a cake. I wasn't in any of them. It hit me then. They had truly erased me from their lives. 6 years of memories without me. 6 years of pretending I never existed. We sat in the living room. My father joined us a few minutes later, holding 2 mugs of tea. He offered me one. I didn't take it. Then the pleading began. My mother started softly, speaking of family, of forgiveness, of second chances. She said Rebecca was struggling, that William was broken, not just physically, but emotionally. That their son needed a stable male presence. That I could help them get through this. My father chimed in, calling it an opportunity for healing. He said life was too short to hold grudges. That what happened, while painful, was in the past. And then came the part that made my blood run cold. "You've always been stronger than William," my mother said. "He was never as responsible. You were the stable one. That's why we need you now. For your brother. For his son. For all of us." There it was. Not remorse. Not regret. Expectation. They weren't trying to repair the damage. They were trying to recruit me as a replacement. I let the silence stretch until it was unbearable. Then I stood. "Do you even hear yourselves?" I said, my voice calm but shaking. "You're not asking me to come home. You're asking me to clean up the mess William made again." They started to protest, but I raised my hand. 6 years ago, I said slowly, he betrayed me. He stole the woman I loved, the life we were building. And you stood behind him. You told me to be happy for them. Do you remember that, Mom? You said I should be happy that you'd be a grandmother. She looked away, ashamed. But I kept going. You didn't just lose a son that day, you pushed him out. You chose convenience and appearances over decency. Over me. My father looked pained. We didn't know what to do. It was complicated. No, I snapped. It was simple. You should have stood up for me. Or at the very least, not expected me to celebrate my own humiliation. I stepped toward the door. Now you want me to act like none of it happened? To babysit the product of their affair while he recovers in a hospital bed and she plays widow without the title. My mother's eyes welled with tears. He's your nephew. I paused at the door. And I feel sorry for him, I said quietly. I truly do. He didn't ask for any of this. But I'm not going to destroy my own healing just to bandage the wound you all ignored for years. So that's it, my father asked, his voice rising slightly. You're abandoning your family? I turned to face them one last time. No, you did that. I'm just choosing not to come back to a house that burned itself down. Then I walked out. The drive home was quiet. Too quiet. No music. No podcasts. Just the hum of the engine and the storm inside my head. I replayed everything, my mother's trembling voice, my father's thinly veiled guilt, the look in Rebecca's eyes when our paths crossed in the hospital hallway. Not remorseful. Not apologetic. Just tired. And that boy. My nephew. My brother's son. So innocent. So unaware of the tangled history that had brought me to his hospital room. He smiled at me like I was someone worth smiling at. Like he didn't know I was supposed to hate everything about the life that made him. I hated that he made me feel something. I pulled into my driveway long after dark. The porch light flickered to life. It had been doing that for months. I'd never gotten around to fixing it. I stepped inside and shut the door behind me, locking out the night. Locking out the past. But I couldn't lock out the thoughts. All this time, I had believed I was healing. That time and distance were enough. But one call, one visit, and all that pain had come back, raw, sharp, unforgiving. It wasn't gone. It had just been sleeping. I dropped onto my couch, exhausted. The apartment was quiet, still. Safe. It was mine. I had built this life from the ashes of the old one. And now the people who lit the match wanted me to help them rebuild their own homes with the same hands they burned. I took a deep breath, and then another, and I made my decision. I wasn't going back. Not now. Maybe not ever. But I wasn't going to live with bitterness either. I'd carry the scars, that much was unavoidable, but I wouldn't let them define me anymore. I wouldn't let William's choices or Rebecca's betrayal dictate my future. And I certainly wouldn't let my parents' guilt trap me in a cycle of obligation disguised as forgiveness. They had made their choices. Now, I was making mine. I wrote them a letter the next morning, not a long one. Just enough to say what I needed to say. That I hoped William recovered. That I had no ill will toward the child. But I would not be part of their story anymore unless they wanted to truly acknowledge the pain they caused, not as an afterthought or bargaining chip, but as a starting point for something real. Until then, I was done. I folded the letter, sealed it, and dropped it in the mailbox. It felt final. Clean. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running from the past. I was walking away from it, calmly, deliberately, towards something better. Toward myself.